My name is Dr. Todd Cielo. I've been in practice for 14 years in South Tampa, and over the last 14 years, I've prided myself in two things in my office: ligament laxity analysis and objective documentation. We always have patients that come into our offices and our firms have all these subjective complaints. We know, you know, insurance companies don't care about symptomatology. What I'm here to do is I have 3 objectives today in 50 minutes. Objective number 1 is that I'm going to show you how to quantify ligament laxity analysis from a clinical medical standpoint. 2, I'm going to try to show you how to quantify ligament laxity analysis from a legal standpoint. And I'm going to show you how my DXD software marries them two together with the help of about 100 years of literature. All your learned treatises, all the objectification of all the textbooks that we had to memorize throughout school, especially from a radiology standpoint. Today we have a vast group, which I'm very excited about. We have MDs, DCs, DOs, surgeons, radiologists, case managers, attorneys, MRI companies, MRI reps, and case managers. So all this information encompasses all of our lives in the injury world. These are the topics that we're going to be going over today. We're going to be going over connective tissue injuries 728.4. This is a big value driver in the injury world. It's something that is overlooked by all medical field offices. Connective tissue injury is evaluated through a very simple process of evaluating George's line. George's line's been around for almost 100 years. We're going to go over some basic anatomy that all doctors should know. In my opinion, if the attorney knows more than the doctor about anatomy, you can make the opposing doctors feel very insignificant by not answering these questions for the jury. And that's what I'm going to show you, some basic anatomical facts that you guys should know from an attorney standpoint. I'm going to talk about the physiology of AOMSI, and this is highlighted in the 4th, 5th, and 6th edition. Very subtle differences. I'm going to go over all 3. There's the 4th, 5th, and 6th. We're going to talk about digitization. It's a big buzzword that's been around for almost 2 decades. And I'm going to show you how something that's very simple, that in the mid-90s, early 90s, when I went to school, this is how we used to do it. It's a 26% error rate when I do it by hand. And this is the technology that we had. This is the technology that people still use. This is the technology that's out of date. I'm going to go over illustrations of translation angulation, 2 simple definitions that have been around since 1975. I'm going to go over categories of healing. I'm going to go over how unique our software is, DXD software report is, not only from a legal standpoint, but from an anatomical and medical standpoint. I'm going to be going over the difference between static and motion films. There's a big difference, and there's pros and cons of both. There's a lot of discrepancies in motion films today, and there's a lot of differences in opinion and misperceptions in motion films, and I'm going to tell you about the pros and cons of everything. I'm going to go over the protocol for evaluating ligament laxity, and then I'm going to go over some Colossus definitions. The challenges that we face as practitioners is documentation. We need objective documentation because the symptomatology, the subjectivity is always there. Cervicogenital headaches, radicular pain, hypoparesthesia, foot drop, etc. So we need something that's objective from the AMA guideline standpoint and from a diagnostic standpoint, and that's how we marry those two together. I'm going to show you how to establish a referral network between MD, DCs, and attorneys so everybody's on the same page, and the starting step is from the radiologist. And that's why I have a handful of radiologists today. I want to be asking their help so we can define some anatomical variations for you guys. And then we increase our credibility not only in court, but in the eyes of the attorneys when we know some of these definitions from the AMA guidelines. And that learned treatise is something that these attorneys rely on. Here's your Cliff Notes. On the right-hand side is some literature that I copied for everybody to take home. So please reference that when I'm quoting some stuff so you can see it in black and white. I'm going to go over some essentials in radiology from Yoka Monroe, AMA guidelines. There's actually a little cheat sheet here for you guys to fill in the blanks as I'm jabbering up here. There is a survey. Please fill out the survey as you're going along because no one's going to have time to fill it out at the end. Okay? And then we have some sample MRI reports to go over. And on the left-hand side, there's some letters to the doctors and attorneys. So let's go forward. For the foundation of ligament laxity, we have to talk about George's line. George's line's been around since 1919. George's line, when it's broken, and George's line is the posterior aspect, which is behind the neck, is the posterior aspect of the vertebral bodies. So here's the anterior aspect, here's your throat, here's the posterior aspect. So on flexion extension studies, which is built to do stress on the spine, that's the only reason, and it's linear, and that's what the AMA guidelines approve, are those two for pathology, 4th, 5th, and 6th. So when it's broken, there's only 4 reasons if it's broken. Not basic reasons, very specific reasons. 1 is a fracture, 2 is a dislocation, 3 is degenerative changes, and 4 is ligament laxity. The majority of the patients that we see in our clinics, they're not going to have a fracture or dislocation. If they have that, they're certainly not coming to a DC's office. They're possibly going to an MD for some pain management, but they're so unstable that they're going to have to get some type of stability from a surgical standpoint. So right there, you don't need any quantification. It's there in black and white. But the last 2 is what we see in our offices all the time, which is ligament laxity, and that's the quantification that I'm going to be going over today, and degenerative changes. And I'm going to tell you the subtle differences when you measure a degenerative change and when you don't measure a degenerative change, because the defense loves honing in on that.